the export sector of the country, a vital component in the Sri Lankan economy. Now, we keep hearing some good news about this sector, isn't it? 20% growth in January, overall new growth targets being achieved even for the year 2020-2021. But amidst all this, are there some key points that we are missing out on? As a businessman, an investor, or a professional, what do you need to know about the Sri Lankan export sector? And is there a common national export strategy in Sri Lanka? How did that come into being? This will be our focus today here in Bisnomics, in your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. And we are in conversation with none other than Mr. Fazal Mushin, who is the former chairman of the Exporters Association of Sri Lanka. Mr. Fazal, welcome to Bisnomics. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you. My pleasure being here.
Mr. Fazal, now you were there at the time that the national export strategy was being drafted and being introduced. What exactly is the main reason for the national export strategy to be created, and how did it come about? Because usually we hear in Sri Lanka, most of the time, policies keep changing all the time when the governments change and so on. Lack of continuity is a key problem. Amidst all this kind of a background, how did the national export strategy come about? What is the root story there?
So you hit the nail on the head that we have always had policy inconsistency in Sri Lanka. Plus the fact that the drivers were always changing based on the politics of that particular time. And we have been knocking on the same door, talking about the same thing, and ending up with the same answer. Now, from a point of view of an association representing the exporters, we felt that we don't need to confront, we need to engage, because the confrontation strategy always is putting a press release, criticizing, and finding that we get a rebuff from the government, and then it just goes back and forth. So we decided as an association to engage, and we needed to be collectivized, because we needed that we can't speak with different voices. We needed to engage all the other associations involved in exports. So we engaged all the other export representatives from governments to other export chambers and other entities to have a common agenda. In that, we also develop our own export strategy. And we came out with 3 strategies of recommendations that we wanted to have one set of documents that we keep on placing upon government, as this is the plan that we want to go ahead with, rather than changing the rules as and when it suits a particular government or a politician. Now, with the last strategy, where we collectively as an association and also with other associations, we found that we didn't have a national strategy. And we needed to bring all these things to the one table where we can have a common agenda with all the stakeholders. So this is the key factor, that the stakeholders, meaning the government, the private sector, the people involved in the private sector, the stakeholders in other line ministries, we all decided that we needed to be on the same page. Now, having said that, we also knew that we didn't have a facilitator who could do this. Now, the EDB being the primary apex body,
Export Development Board.
Yes, being the representative of the exporters, and we were fortunate enough to have at that time the chairperson being Mrs. Malwatha, who also
Mrs. Indira Malwatha.
Indira Malwatha, yes, who was also been in the in the private sector, and she welcomed our suggestions, and we also had a plan, or because of our good relationships, that we had to have an open door policy. We needed a policy where we could walk into the EDB, treat it like it's our own institution, work alongside our colleagues. Now, we call them colleagues, we don't call them government counterparts, where we can work alongside and speak the same language and argue for the same point, that we want this sector to grow. Now, once we achieved certain relationship barriers that we had to overcome, the ITC came and offered to be
the International Trade Center.
International Trade Center came to facilitate this process of developing a national strategy for exports, which has been done in other countries as well. Now, this gave,
I mean, if you take, for example, even countries like India, do they have a national strategy?
they have a national policy,
Okay.
which their policy is very much based on their own interests, but which is a long-term policy, which does not change like we would change our day-to-day policies. Like similar to China, they have a national policy. Now, we did not have a strategy in place even to understand where we need to go, how we need to go, and what are the things that we need to facilitate to enable this policy to take place, because we have terminologies that we basically talk about, but when you go to do it, it doesn't happen. And it's all this rhetoric that is said, yes, we are giving this, we are doing that, we are allowing this, we are welcoming this, but ultimately on the ground nothing really happens. And it is only the people who are in the know, who are well connected, who can get things done. And the fact is, it is not an open, it's very much a one-handed way of doing business, and it still continues to do that in many ways.
And it prevents more players from actually entering the export markets from Sri Lanka as well. Mr. Fazal, if you look at the main points of this national export strategy, what were the key points and factors, and how did those actually benefit the industry in Sri Lanka?
See, these factors are not something new. It's not something that we did not know in our own collective bodies.
Correct.
We knew this. We just didn't know how to cooperate in trying to achieve a common agenda. Now, once we were able to achieve that, and there again, the biggest factor was...
Maybe you could share some of the points as well.
Well, the biggest driving factor was the private sector was enabled to lead. We were, and I was also the co-chair of the steering committee, where we were able to lead along with our colleagues in the government, where we were able to do and say what we knew best. And there was the biggest factor, that we were able to agree or even to disagree, being on the same page. So, when we knew that we had crossed that bridge of mistrust, because we were always seen as private sector is a different person, government sector is a different person, but ultimately we work for the same agenda, benefit of Sri Lanka.
Correct.
And we want to expand the basket rather than the traditional basket that we always been carrying forward. Now, to have those things, we also need a proper leadership. And I take Mrs. Indira Malwata as the person who actually gave us the encouragement, the freedom for us to be able to participate in driving what we wanted.
So, what you believe is, as per the strategy as well, the private sector needs to lead the growth of exports.
Of course,
in
definitely.
country. You mentioned about the traditional basket and the modern basket. Now, something very interesting there, because I believe the traditional basket was more like tea, apparel, and so on.
Well, apparel comes as a modern product, but tea, rubber, coconut, these are all considered traditional basket.
What are the modern basket elements that you feel Sri Lanka is missing out on?
Well, it's not a case of Sri Lanka missing out. It's the fact is, what have we done beyond apparels? What have we really gained?
We lost out on the wave of electronics, for sure.
We have lost out on the opportunity of getting into electronics. But the fact is, the ability is still with us, because now COVID has given us an opportunity. It has shown us that we have a huge landscape that we can cover.
Correct.
Being the online portal, being the service areas that we can deliver, we can be as good as any country, and we have our unique strengths, and we don't have to rely on the traditional basket.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fazal, but we also see a lot of the Western, like in US and even in Europe, most of those companies are now looking at shifting away from depending only on China into more modern manufacturing destinations. Thus lies the window of opportunity.
That was the greatest opportunity that we missed out on, because when we realized that this was going to happen, other countries went knocking on the US, canvassing for such businesses. What did we do? We said we are going to reform our policies, we are going to encourage foreign investment. What did that bring in? The 180 million in FDIs, which is nothing. We should have gone and given a plug and play environment. You go to Dubai, you can within 2 hours set up your business, be able to plug and play without any restrictions and run your business with just paying a standard flat rate of whatever the taxes they impose, and they give you from the building, the land, everything is free. Now, what was stopping us to going to say Samsung and saying, you just bring your product, we will give you everything else from the building, the land, the facilities, everything. We didn't have that openness in thinking that we will be swallowed up by these giants, rather than allowing them to come and we can facilitate them to do their business in this country, because we have all the skill sets. We have the literacy, we have the whole technical know-how, we have the banking system, we have the telecommunication system,
strategic location,
and the location. So, we have all the ingredients, except that we don't have the correct thinking, and the thinking comes from leadership, and leadership unfortunately is limited to the same people driving the same message, and they have a different plan, and their plan does not suit our plan, because we have a need to survive. They have a need to politically survive. We have to pay salaries, we have to run businesses, we have to innovate. We need to find different ways of meeting these challenges, and the private sector has been the most resilient, and especially the exporters has been the most resilient in the last 30 years.
That they survived through 30 years of war, survived through the waves of the tsunami, the East attack incidents, so many natural disasters, and now the pandemic as well. Clearly, Sri Lankan private sector has to be one of the most resilient in the world.
It is, and it's not recognized, and is not given the due credit, and yet we are again fighting our own battles, because we have people coming to tell us that they know what we are doing.
Correct.
They say that we are hoarding money abroad, whereas where is the proof? Where is the ability for us to even keep money abroad when we need to spend money locally for our raw materials, our advances, our packing material which we have to import? We don't have
and then now this new talk of a flat one-time tax, it's more like you're being fined for doing well and doing good business.
Because we don't have a way of retorting back. We don't have a way of fighting back, because imagine I am doing a business and I stand up and say I'm refusing to adhere to what government says. What is the repercussion for me? We all have to fall in line one way or the other. Unfortunately, we don't have a trade union. We don't have. We don't have. So we can't go on strike. We can't go on the road and have felapalis. We need to always find that dialogue is the best way.
Correct.
So this is where our agenda has always been. But we need.
But is your agenda falling on deaf ears? Is the question.
It has always fallen on deaf ears. Unfortunately, it is the case, and we keep trying to knock on these doors to open, to engage with us, because we are always ever willing to engage.
Correct.
Unfortunately, we suffer because our businesses suffer, and if we don't have competition being built up locally, if we don't have new talent coming in, if we don't have new innovative ideas coming in, and if we say we want to be Singapore, how it's impossible for us to be Singapore, because we don't think like Singaporeans.
Some interesting points there indeed, Mr. Fazal. We are going to continue this discussion after the break. Stay tuned. We will be back after this short break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I'm Tharindra Amarasekara. We are in conversation with Mr. Fazal Mushin regarding the current export strategy of Sri Lanka and the way forward. Mr. Fazal, now I believe any strategy when being developed, there are lots of stakeholders to be considered.
Yes.
Any policy for that matter, I think one of the key problems from my understanding is that politicians make policies only looking at their political agenda, only looking at what is probably easy to market, without necessarily talking to the stakeholders, the parties that have got their skin in the game. And that can absolutely lead to lack of sustainability of any initiative, because you can develop policies, but it's the businesses, the business ventures and the businessmen who are into exporting that needs to drive it. Now, we saw a recent incident with regard to in Dubai, this World Expo, where there was one famous design, an award-winning design for the Sri Lankan stall, but I believe end of the day they went ahead with something completely different and ignoring that particular stall design that was well accepted. Now, this is only one simple instance where it clearly shows that stakeholders are not being considered. But I believe that when the national export strategy was developed, it considered discussions with the stakeholders. Who are the main stakeholders when developing a national export strategy?
Primarily the exporters, they themselves, because they have got their money invested in that industry. Then we need the academia, we need the universities, we need the government bureaucrats, because they are equally stakeholders in maintaining the policy and maintaining the rules of the game. We need everyone in that chain, and when we developed the export strategy, we had nearly 1,000 stakeholders participating. We had 3 rounds of collective discussions, 4 rounds in fact, going across the country in trying to understand what each stakeholder's viewpoint was. Then we had again everything driven by the private sector and the equivalent bureaucrat from the EDB who was a colleague, rather than saying the equivalent joint chairman or whatever. We did not have any political interference, and that we were very fortunate that we had a very strong chairperson, Mrs. Indira Wadmata, who ensured that there was no interference by either the state minister or the minister, that we were given a free hand to develop this. Now, this particular national export strategy, I can very well say, was developed by us with the help of our colleagues in government and all the ministries that were aligned in wherever exports was considered. That's nearly 60 odd ministries were all involved, and we had several rounds of talks. We had all the secretaries to talk at a higher level. We had the different engagements where we invited every sector, and we identified 6 pillars in the final strategy. And those.
Would you like to share those pillars with us?
Yeah, I mean, this is a document that basically goes into a big document.
Yes.
But primarily these pillars were made in such a way that they were adaptable to any particular situation, and that too can relate to today's context. Well, I mean, we had people from the Department of Commerce, from the Ministry of Agriculture, from the phytosanitary, from the universities.
Yes.
We had people from every area wherever they were connected from the lands, because we needed a land bank to be from the Ministry of Finance. We had every 60 odd ministries involved in this consultative process, and it was all driven with one common agenda, that we need to develop this as a national. It was not a government. It was a national strategy.
Politically independent.
Politically independent.
Right. And was it put into action, this national export strategy, and is it still in action?
We had a timeline, we had a plan, we had certain goals to achieve within a timeline, and those goals were set in motion. Of course, with the change of the guard, some of those strategies did not go ahead, but some were still pursued, and some strategies are still being implemented. But as a total, we would like the existing government or any government to accept and start rolling out whatever the strategies that were agreed by the stakeholders, be it be private or be state.
Correct. Because when you only look at, or when you're only executing a part of the plan, I believe it ruins the heart of the plan.
It doesn't make any sense.
Correct.
Because we did not have any agenda except the fact to drive the country from where we were into a different era, into a different area of our capabilities
Correct.
and making use of our resources and the fact that we wanted to be a part of the global supply chain. We use this word supply chain, but we don't understand global supply chain means we may only make one part of a bigger chain, and we need to be a part of that because we
If
can't
you look
do
at an iPhone, different parts are made in different parts of
exactly.
the world. I mean, that's the modular nature of the modern supply chain, and that's where our export sector should play
Exactly, and we should not think that we have got the best and the best
in everything.
in everything. You can't find, I mean, if you take the sea fish that we have, that same fish can swim to another country. So, how do we claim that that's our fish and that's the best fish? We need to have it all value added. We need to be able to ready to eat, ready to drink, even a consumer product manufactured or be a part of it. And there are industries which are already part of that supply chain.
You mentioned a very important word there, value addition. Isn't this the Achilles' heel or the weak spot of the Sri Lankan economy and even the export sector for that matter? Because we hear about the growth of export in terms of numbers, but the real question remains how much of that value actually gets, money actually gets retained in the country, because we are still dependent a lot on the imports as well for our export sector.
Of
So,
course.
how much of a strength do we really have in the whole value addition game?
See, you ask yourself how much do we spend in the R&D expenditure from a national point of view and from a company point of view. Of course, the incentives were given for triple taxation, waivers, etc. But from a government point of view, how much was really put aside for R&D? Was there a sincere effort to develop the R&D? Then was there any curriculum, because this all starts from the ability to have human resources, human talent. Why is that only Moratuwa University is identified as the most best university for IT graduates? Because they have got the people like Google spending and investing in that university to collectively develop the what we call, the raw material of the human factor, the human capital. Now, we need people who are able to understand, to not to be feel entitlement, to work towards what you want to achieve, and those industries can grow. Now we have had a reboot in the entire system with pandemic. I think pandemic can be a fantastic opportunity for us to get out of this comfort zone, to understand that we can survive from work from home, which has become more profitable.
Correct.
The banks are making money, companies are making money. It's just that
even individuals, they are working on online platforms like Fiverr and all that, and they are earning in dollars for
exactly,
and good money.
exactly, and this is why the opportunity has now come. If we don't piggyback on it,
Correct.
then again we are going to miss the bus.
I think the real question here is, correct me if I'm wrong, but if already companies and individuals are achieving so much without the necessary parties working together, how much can we really achieve if all the necessary parties start working together, isn't it?
And for that we need a plan, and we need a plan that will be consistently rolled out,
Correct.
also evolve, and that we can achieve certain landmarks within a certain set number of years for us to achieve this, because we don't have a large landmass. We don't have numbers to produce in terms of raw material. We do need to rely on imports. So, but with little what we have got, we have to maximize that opportunity to make the best of whatever we can in terms of the incremental values that we can gain.
Fazal, now there have been earlier in the past also certain strategic initiatives towards exports. What was different about the national export strategy? And you mentioned one outcome, which was where you said it was about letting the private sector drive
Yes.
the export development activity. What were the other outcomes of this particular national export strategy?
See, with that, we were able to do a lot of other good things that came out of our collaborative efforts because of the relationships that we made with our colleagues on the other side of the table. We were able to, we hosted WEDEF in Sri Lanka. Again, it was a private public cooperation that enabled that that conference to be held in Sri Lanka. You touched on the expo that you spoke about. Again, that was also led by a private-public cooperative approach, where we were able to achieve a lot more from all stakeholders being involved in it than one side of the coin saying we know what is right for you, whereas we are not the actual players in that game. So, where cooperative effort is the way that we need to engage and move forward. And if you take a country like Malaysia, if you take a country like Thailand, they never ignored their past, they never ignored their agriculture, they never ignored their traditional basket. What they did was they accelerate the growth of the modern basket in industry.
While letting the traditional basket be the cash cow.
Exactly. Here we think we are protecting the traditional basket and not letting any other industry evolve. Whereas we talk about being like them, and if you talk about administratively,
we are nowhere there.
We are nowhere there. Look at the policies, look at the ministries that are overlapping. Look at the functionality from going from one table to another table.
It seems like for one thing there are so many different ministers and ministries, but hardly anything is getting done, Fazal.
Nothing. We have not changed from what we inherited from the times of the British colonial system, rather than putting roadblocks in front of our own progress. And I may be saying things that are not the most popular things, but we also understand from the industry that I can talk about certain things like this. There are others who can talk about what the business is. Correct. And where the numbers will come from.
Correct.
Because we all need to play a part.
Correct. Absolutely.
And we also need to realize that we can never be like Singapore, because Singapore is so far ahead of us. We can only imagine and dream of Singapore. We can't be Sri Lanka.
The Sri Lanka that was in the 60s, 70s.
What are we talking about? Look at the lethargy of the people. Look at the way the people feel entitled that they can just be at home, drive a three-wheeler, and then they can demand various things. Where is the law of this country? Where is the judiciary? If I was a foreigner, I would be scared to invest my money in this country, because what is the sovereign risk? Whose money is invested? It's our own money. Where are we attracting foreign investment into this country? What are we giving them? You take Dubai. It's not an Islamic country. It's a very modern country where it provides everything under the sun. You earn from there, they pay you well. Correct. They don't charge you taxes.
And the expat community is definitely looked after.
Looked after, and they spend their money there. Even the stock market there is run on British law. They have a British judiciary system there only to deal with the way the financial markets work.
Correct.
So they make everything safe for people. I mean, we don't have any of those things.
A lot of factors to be considered there indeed, Fazal. Stay tuned. We will be back after this short break. This is Bisnomics. Passionate thoughts about the export sector. Well, indeed, the highlight today in our discussion with Mr. Fazal Mushin on the national export strategy. Mr. Mushin, now, since we were earlier mentioning and discussing about, I feel how passionate you are. This is something that you worked hard and you worked a lot to see this export sector growing, and having set everything in motion together with your team, it would be a shame to see those efforts falling apart. We understand your passion, we understand your thoughts, and we are happy to give you this platform to share your honest opinion with the public of this country. They deserve to know the truth and nothing but the truth. Yes. That's what we believe in. Now, earlier we were mentioning about the different pillars of the national export strategy, because I think that will shed some light on what areas, what dimensions has this strategy looked into. Would you be happy to share some of these pillars with us?
So the good thing that you have to also understand is that this is a very flexible document.
Okay. It's adaptable.
It's adaptable, it can be changed, it can be used to at different times of, because we were talking about a period where 2018 to 2020. Now today we have a different environment altogether. So at that time, at given time, I mean we looked at information technology, and that's relevant to today. We looked at boating industry, that's very relevant today, because we have ocean that we can develop a huge industry from boating to marina to servicing the marine industry that we can give, like in Dubai or in Singapore, where they have enough craft vessels coming, not only the big vessels. Then we have the wellness tourism, and now wellness tourism is taking Ayurveda to a different level, whether it is sports tourism, wellness tourism, whether it is just hospitality. It's not about sun, sea. We should have a 365-day tourism, not based on seasonality. Because if you go to Thailand, you can go and be a tourist any day of the week or any day of the month. But we have to rely on the season. We can cater to 4 seasons in one day in this country. Then we had the spices and the concentrates. Now we talk about just exporting pepper, cinnamon. We don't add value. We don't create a value added pack. We have a few companies now stepping into that area where we can give a ready to drink, ready to eat. We can look at the nutraceutical market. You can look at the cosmeceutical market. We can take derivatives of those products, set up industries for the extraction of all these products, and our people are talented to do these things, but we don't have the necessary infrastructure in place for us to even bring solvents for extraction.
I believe the same problem also applies with regard to material like graphite and graphene. We are exporting gunny bags of graphite at meager dollar amounts, whereas some companies add value, convert that into more value-added graphene and are earning millions.
So you can see Elon Musk has banked on energy as the next wave, and he's setting up battery manufacturing units in China.
Correct.
Why aren't we plugging into that? Why are we going to be only the provider of the raw material to that? So this is where I think one company is already engaged in that, and that's a good way, and that should be the way. But why not allow even a small SME to jump onto a bandwagon and try to prosper on that? Because we have some very innovative, very clever people in this country who are able to understand this. And language is not a barrier, but language should be made a priority, but it should never be a barrier.
Correct.
It should not be a Colombo-based person who has got all the access to everything. A person from Jaffna should be able to do equally the same thing and access all these facilities, information, and the way he can transact his business.
Correct.
I mean, we were talking about even processed fruit, beverages. Now we are talking about moringa, which is a superfood. We have coconut water. Now, why are we sending raw materials to other countries? And the other day I was at a coffee launch where Sri Lankan coffee was as good as any imported coffee that you can taste. And here I am listening to the presentation by the head of a particular organization in the government.
Correct.
Saying that we charge cess on value added products and we don't charge cess on the raw material. Where does this thinking come from?
You're kind of discouraging innovative thinking. You're being fined for innovative thinking.
We are thinking about protecting what we have, which the whole world has, and how much do we have of that.
Correct.
We are not a unique country. We share the same resources that every country shares. We must be able to use these things with our location. We are sitting on the best location in terms of the shipping lines, in terms of the airlines. Why can't we harness these things? You call ourselves a hub. We already have a hub act. How much do we use that act? Do we even know the act exists even? We had electrical and electronic components as an industry. Unfortunately, one of our local industries had to relocate to Vietnam and Dubai because they could not get things done in this country. So why are we asking our own people to go and relocate when we can facilitate all these things in this country? And these were identified back in 2018. Then we had a different strategy for all the other components or industries that were not identified at that time. So that's how we were able to be flexible, that we can adapt it to today. And this is not a political tool. This is not a colored document, either red, blue, green. It is a document that was asked, requested, and wanted by the private sector.
And draped in the Sri Lankan flag for the entire country.
Exactly. And if you go to see today, we have Expo happening in Dubai.
There's a lot of talk about poor Sri Lankan representation there.
Well, I mean, to be fair, one has to understand the financial implications that are faced by the authorities who actually are running the Expo now. So it's not to criticize that they did the wrong thing or they are doing whatever they can within the budgets, and that what was initially planned and what was unfolded was dependent totally on what the money that was available.
Correct.
But we have a private sector chamber having a mini expo within the expo, trying to take the Sri Lankan brands across there. Now these were the initiatives that we want to take place and be allowed to take place.
Correct.
Because it is our business, let us put our money where our mouth is and let us lead the industry. Not to be held accountable, not to be told you can do this, you can't do that.
Don't add value and we will tax you and so on.
So, I mean, what are we doing? We are paying for someone to sit in office to tell us what to do, and even the exchange. We had a 6 months roadmap of trying to bring all the foreign exchange and trying to curtail the expenditure of money going out of the country. How much was that successful? Do we hold the person who gave us that 6 months roadmap accountable?
Correct.
But we are still struggling with our forex. So what are we doing to earn forex besides goods and services? Are we engaging in the digital economy? Are we engaging in the online space? Why not even engage in the crypto space? I mean, the port city is ideal. It's a good start, and I think the draft of the mandate of the port city is in the works. But then with the bureaucracy that exists in Sri Lanka, can that be an enabler?
The ease of business wise, we are not quite there.
We are not there. If you take even the happiness index, if people measure that, and people do measure it, we are like 129 in the world. So where are our people happy? Why is it that only a certain elite can enjoy everything? Why is it that the rest of the country, who when they are called for are the greatest and the best and they vote us in, but forgotten the rest of the time?
Some deep questions that
Exactly.
require a lot of thinking. Mr. Fazal, the initiatives that you all developed within the national export strategy, like you said, allowing the private sector to lead the exports and having that right infrastructure and so on. Now, how can these initiatives scale up within a short time frame? Because I believe that some of these would require more long-term implementation. But having said that, we also cannot ignore the short term. So, how can these initiatives of the national export strategy?
So this strategy actually looked into both long and short.
Okay.
There are long-term strategies that can be built in because you need to build capacity, you need to build up a workforce, you need to have educated workforce that is knowledgeable. We need to be able to import intellectual capacity.
Correct.
We need to be able.
Today, the digital sector, a lot of people are saying we can't find cloud architects and so on. That it's very difficult.
So we need to be able to import them in. We need to be able to spend on them, or we are going to lose that opportunity. We need then look at the short term strategy. What can be done on the short term? Because there are things that can happen that on the short term, now if you take the refuse tea that we have so much of refuse tea. Do you know the iced tea market in the world? US is the largest consumer of iced tea. Now, where is this iced tea coming from? Refuse tea.
Oh, wow.
Why aren't we using this? Only a couple of companies who have actually started doing the extracts of refuse tea to sell it to these flavoring companies who are making the iced tea. So why are we not doing this?
Very thoughts indeed. Finally, what are the key takeaways from the national export strategy, Mr. Fazal?
I think the biggest thing is our mindset. If we can get over this mindset, and if we understand that we should not allow authorities to run our business, and they should be running what we tell them, because it's a collective, cooperative, win-win situation. It is not a personal agenda, because if you look at either side, they have come and done the same thing, and they have achieved nothing other than just talk.
But one might say that in the last few months, there has been a tremendous growth of export.
Of course. And that will continue. But then look at the statistics that have been there in the last several years, the same numbers. We have been fortunate. Yes, we have survived the pandemic. We have a huge logistic problem that is not only for us, it's globally. Our numbers have been there because our industrial, the merchandise has still remained the same. So, but then what are the new sectors that have come on board? What have we capitalized on?
It's only a matter of time where we start to hear a grim news by depending only on the traditional sectors.
Exactly. What about the online space? What about the B2C? Why can't we do a B2C business? What has Amazon become? A bookshop has become the largest store. We have people who are they are entrepreneurs who are daring enough to take their businesses abroad. Correct. We just need to facilitate. Why don't we have an Exim Bank to help small SME businesses to grow? Why is it that we need collateral for everything?
When the small players can't get it, they rely on all these loan sharks and all that and fall into bigger problems.
Yes. Why is our agriculture industry in such a plight?
And doesn't Sri Lankan exporters and even the small players badly lack a development bank, a bank that supports the development of these small micro entrepreneurs and so on?
So this is where I think we need a sort of a Exim Bank that specifically targets the small SMEs, because the growth of our business has always come from SMEs.
Correct.
And growth has come from the western province and now a bit of the central province. Then what about the rest of the country then?
Yeah.
And we have so much of resources available.
With very large percentages of population, yes.
And if you take a country like Vietnam, they specialize, each person specializes in a particular area. So then there's collective cooperation about how you get things done and move forward. Here, everyone is trying to copy the other person. So this competitiveness amongst us with what little we have, that attitude has to change.
Correct. It's not about trying to encroach on each other's market or cannibalize each other's market, but to go global.
So where does that start from? Education. Why is it such a big problem for anyone to understand the root cause of our problems is education? Why is it difficult to change that? Is it to suit my purpose, or is it to keep people in where they are? What is all the problems that we are facing is all created or distractions, or why not let the country prosper? If you want to be Singapore, why not then follow Lee Kuan's plan that he had, a very firm hand, but with a plan.
Correct. And the plan did incorporate and integrate all these global players as well.
Yes.
So certainly, indeed, Mr. Fazal, we hope that the right authorities will at least now start looking at this problem in a more realistic perspective and understand that things need to change sooner than later in order for the export sector to keep growing. We indeed are very happy to see the growth of the export sector, but as you very correctly said, if the root causes don't get addressed, this dream run of the exports might not be there for too long, and that's not something any of us want to happen for our beautiful country. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts with us. You are very passionate about this, and I can see that you have gone into a lot of depth in study. You have developed this strategy together with your team, and we sincerely hope that this strategy in its whole will see the light of day and get executed as planned and take our export sector to the next level as well.
Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to express my opinion in certain areas and the industries as a whole. And I'm hoping that maybe the speakers who will come after me in different aspects of exports will be better broad-based what we want as a strategy, as a collective.
For sure. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And no matter what business you may be in, the export market is something you cannot consider to be dropped out of your planning. It should be integrated to your corporate strategies and your corporate planning. Now, the National Export Strategy is there to ensure the sustainability of the export sector of Sri Lanka, and let's hope the authorities will take this strategy seriously and execute it properly, because at the end of the day, a stronger, successful and prosperous Sri Lanka is what we all aspire for. I'm Tharindra Amarasekara, and until the next episode, have a profitable week ahead.